everyone, and good afternoon to our online audience as well. Without much ado, we'll be going into the plenary session. And the first topic that we're going to take is going to be taken by a distinguished professor of pediatric neurology, Professor Edwin Eseigbe. Please, sir, may you be upstanding as I read your citation. Professor Edwin Ehi Eseigbe is a professor of pediatrics and current head Department of Pediatrics at Benue State University and the Benue State University Teaching Hospital in Makurdi, North Central Nigeria. He's a consultant pediatric neurologist and neurodevelopmental pediatrician at BSUT and a visiting professor of pediatrics to the Bingham University, Karu in Nasarawa State, North Central Nigeria. Professor Ehi Eseigbe is a medical graduate of the University of Benin, Benin City, Nigeria. He is also a fellow of the West African College of Physicians, the American Academy of Cerebral Palsy and Developmental Medicine, the Chartered Institute of Administration, and a member of the Nigerian Institute of Management. You can see that he's a man of many parts. His research work over the past 2 decades has focused on pediatric neurology, growth and development in childhood, neurodevelopmental disorders in childhood, as well as notifiable diseases, notably Lassa fever, COVID-19 disease, and the human monkeypox infection. He has worked on and championed the development of locally adaptable tools for the assessment of growth and development in the Nigerian child. One of such tools is the SMART score, which he developed for assessment of growth and development in under fives, a pesset, I must say. He has carried out and supervised research on nutritional status in adolescents, children with cerebral palsy and epilepsy, and recently in under fives with severe acute malnutrition in Makurdi, particularly among those in internally displaced persons camps. Professor Eseigbe has served and is still serving on several academic and institutional boards and committees. He was the Chief Medical Director of Bingham University Teaching Hospital, Jos, between 2016 and 2020, where he established the Center for Child and Adolescent Health and Development. You see, he's truly a trailblazer. He is a member of the Expert Review Committee of the National Health Insurance Scheme on treatment guidelines and protocols for childhood illnesses in Nigeria. Furthermore, he's the project director and chair of the Anti-Tobacco Use and Exposure Initiatives of the Pediatric Association of Nigeria and serves as the director of medical missions in the Anglican Diocese of Jos. Professor Ehi Eseigbe is the current president of the Child Neurology Society of Nigeria. Please give it up for Professor Eseigbe as he takes us through the topic, nutrition in early life, optimizing this critical window of opportunity for growth and development. You're welcome, sir. Good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon to our online audience as well. Without much ado, we'll be going into the plenary session. And the first topic that we're going to take is going to be taken by a distinguished professor of pediatric neurology, Professor Edwin Eseigbe.
The chair of this occasion, very distinguished pediatrician and my teacher, Professor Abiodun. Distinguished participants here and online, I want to thank FrieslandCampina for providing, one, the opportunity to have this discourse with you. Okay, so I am not a paid staff of FrieslandCampina, but I can disclose that I was paid an honorarium to come here and share my academic experience and clinical experience with you. You can be sure that that payment won't influence, my discourse. All right, so this is where I work. To my left, what you can see here, is the College of Health Sciences in Benue State, and to my right is the Benue State University Teaching Hospital. You can see behind the very famous River Benue. So what will be the scope of what we'll be talking about today? We're looking at growth in infants and children, nutrients important for optimal physical growth and development, requirements for normal human growth, importance of growth monitoring, the dangers and implications of undernutrition. We'll also be looking at the nutritional status of children in West Africa, Nigeria and Ghana to be specific. The link between anthropometric indicators and cognitive development in children will be mentioned. Consequences of malnutrition and nutritional intervention we'll try and discuss. So, physical growth refers to an increase in body size, length or height and weight, and in the size of organs. And now from this slide, you will see or you will note that the first year, in fact, the first 2 years of life, you know, the velocity of growth is quite high, quite rapid. So during the preschool and school years, growth in height and weight is steady, and after this, growth slows until adolescent growth spurt. Similarly, with organ maturation, the brain grows almost exclusively during the early years of life. The kidneys, the reproductive system as well. So, length increases by about 30% by age 5 months. Length increases more than 50% by age 12 months by the first year of life. And infants grow they typically grow about 25 centimeters during the first year. All this pointing to the fact that the first 2 years, particularly the first year of life, is critical for growth and development in the child. Similarly, the weight, even though in the first couple of days the child loses weight, but gains the weight at about the 10th day of life, and then continues to grow, doubles the weight at 6 months and triples it at 1 year. Same thing too, we see a significant increase in the head circumference of the child. At birth, the brain is about 25% of the adult and increases by an average of 1 centimeter per month during the first year of life. Again, still underscoring the fact that in the first year of life, there's plenty of growth and development taking place. All right. So my respected teacher talked about the first 100 days of life. So when we are talking about growth and development, that is very important. So talking about conception to 2 years, to when that child is 2 years old. So it's very, very important. It's a unique period when foundations for optimal health and development across lifespan are established. And the right nutrition and care during the first 100-day window influences not only whether the child will survive, but also her ability or the child's ability to grow, learn, and rise out of poverty. So just like he mentioned, when we are talking about nutrition, it's important to take it right from the very moment the spermatozoon fertilizes the ovum. So what are the factors influencing growth and development? They could be genetic, looking at genetic predisposition, sex, race, nationality. We could have prenatal factors and postnatal factors. I want us to look at, mark nutrition there. Nutrition, very important. And of course, there is one that is currently topical now, and that is the psychological environment of the child. Play and exercise, also very important. So these are factors that influence growth and development in the child. Okay, so for this child, the first 6 months is very important. And that is, with regards to feeding, this child or the child needs to receive exclusive breastfeeding. In fact, breast milk has been described as the first vaccine against nutritional and infectious diseases in childhood. What else do you want? It provides energy, fights infection, brings about neurodevelopment, and what have you. Now, within the next 6 to 24 months, gradual introduction of regular and adequate complementary feeds is advised in addition to breastfeeding. These complementary feeds should be macro, micronutrients, as well as fiber. And after the 24-month period, continuous feeding with locally available food while meeting optimal nutritional standards is also advocated. I'll just run through this. Macro and micronutrients, we all know them. Carbohydrates, the examples are there. Proteins, fats and oil. The micronutrients, the fat-soluble, water-soluble, vitamins. Then the minerals, talking about phosphorus, calcium, chlorine, sodium, potassium. And then the microminerals, those you need in very small quantities in the body, iron, magnesium, and sulfur. Of course, we also need trace elements, talking about iodine, zinc, fluorine, molybdenum, amongst others. Fiber is very important. They are readily available in fruits and vegetables, and they facilitate digestion, promote satiety, in a form, in a way or in a sense, reducing the propensity for obesity, and they promote bowel mobility. Okay, so this is a schematic representation of how some of our nutrients work with regards to growth and other activities associated with growth. So you can see there to your left, you have iron, you have vitamins, the iodine, all being necessary or being important in determining growth, neurological development, physical activity, and of course, productivity in the child. Now, this is just to provide us with sources of some of the nutrients we've talked about. Vitamin A, B1, B2, vitamin C, D, E, K. We need to know what these sources are, what the good sources are, so that when we are providing or giving advice, particularly when it comes to complementary feeds, we know what to give and why we are giving that. Again, minerals, these are good sources of minerals. So, growth in under 5, like I said, is quite unique. It's vital for optimal growth in childhood and I dare say in adulthood. It sets the trend for linear growth and neurodevelopment. A child whose beginning is poor, will hardly achieve much later. Even though there are periods where windows of opportunity for catch-up growth and so on, but it's important that if you want the future to be safeguarded or you want a future that is guaranteed, that is often said that the first 5 years, with regards to nutrition, is one that is adequately addressed. Now, under 5s are also unique because that period is also a period of vulnerability. They depend on adults and caregivers for their well-being, their welfare, their nutrition, and everything that concerns them. And so, even when very hungry, a newborn will not be able to feed itself. What that newborn can only do is cry. They are also susceptible to infections. Infections have a drag on nutrition because the microorganisms are also competing, for these nutrients, for they themselves to survive. And then there is the issue of food insecurity. We all know what is happening in the country right now. Areas where you have insecurity, I doubt if there's any part of the country where that is not existing. And this affects how people go about their usual lives. It disrupts, family life, disrupts income. At the end of the day, what happens is that the adults look for a way, find a way to survive, and the children are left at the discretion of their parents. I'm not saying parents are irresponsible, but I'm saying such scenarios, such situations make under 5s particularly vulnerable. I've talked about the lack of capacity to adequately respond to their nutritional deficiencies. So even if a child knows about vitamin A deficiency or iron deficiency, there is nothing, particularly an under 5, there's nothing that under 5 can do other than probably go still and get rebuked. So they are quite vulnerable. So you have a part of a child's life or a part of humanity that nutrition is very important, and those particularly affected are helpless. Okay, so Nutrition in under 5s is important because it has implications in early childhood and even in later childhood. It has been shown to correlate with cognitive and other aspects of development, subsequently in the child. It's associated with development and outcomes of nutritional disorders and some non-communicable disorders in childhood and obesity. We talked about obesity not too long ago. And then associated socioeconomic outcomes in adulthood. The child who is undernourished or malnourished, grows up with limited or diminished cognitive ability, is not able to compete socially with his peers, can't get employed, can't keep a job, at the end of the day, suffers economic consequences. That's the implication of undernutrition. All right, so let us look at nutritional status and growth generally. We'll talk about nutritional status when talking about growth. So poor growth is defined by statistical comparisons of anthropometric measurements to sex-specific populations and reference growth curves. So the child is described as underweight if that child is below -2 standard deviations from median weight for age of reference population. It's always important to compare these children with their population so that what you are getting will be a reflection of what is happening in the system, and at the same time, you will not have, so many outliers that might require intervention that they do not need. Stunting, similarly, is described as occurring when we have a child in a growth chart. The child's growth curve shows that the child is below -2 standard deviations from median height for age of reference population. Similarly, same thing with wasting. Now, these are the common parameters that are measured or used in assessing nutritional status with regards to linear development in the child. So, what is the burden of undernutrition in early childhood? As we will see, the burden is much more in this part of the world, and the reasons are not, far-fetched. So worldwide, undernutrition leads to nearly 3.1 million deaths of children younger than age of 5 years. And an estimated 165 billion children younger than age of 5 years are noted to be stunted globally. Now, 55.8 million of these stunted children live in sub-Saharan Africa. Nigeria has the second largest number of stunted and wasted children in the world. That is serious. It's a wake-up call to all of us. It's a really, really serious wake-up call to each and every one of us. That is if we are concerned about our future. So whatever money you think you are making today, if you do not safeguard, if you do not nutrition in childhood, you can as well be rest assured that you are throwing that money away. That's investment that will not yield any good return. In Ghana, they said that 1 in every 5 children is stunted and 1 in every 10 children under 5 years is underweight. Now, in 2018, there was an assessment carried out. That was the National Nutrition and Health Survey. It was carried out in Nigeria. And now, the objective of this assessment was to look at the current nutritional status of the population, especially amongst under 5s and women of reproductive age. Now, it's always important to talk about women of reproductive age because research has shown that, in those who have undernutrition or those who have malnutrition early in life, particularly in infancy or under 2 years, it has been shown that their problems started in utero. But these are the findings from Nigeria. Our Nigeria, underweight amongst children under 5, was 19.9%. That looks low. However, the estimate is higher than what is expected, from the global results. Stunting was 32% and has remained the largest burden of malnutrition, with stagnated rates of above 30% since 2014. So the question you will ask is, what are the pediatricians doing? What are the nutritionists doing? What are all stakeholders doing that stunting has remained in one spot the past, at least at the time when that study was done, it's 4 years. And look at the other finding. Only 64% of children in Nigeria are growing healthily without being stunted or wasted. So if there are 10 children, if you see 10 children, okay, that might make it small. If you have 1,000 children in front of you called Nigerians, over 300 of them, will either be wasted or stunted. How does that make you feel? Make you want to donate to a cause, isn't it? Only 27% of infants less than 6 months, are breastfed exclusively. The point is, while over 90% of Nigerian mothers breastfeed their children, only 27% are doing it exclusively. Now, nearly 60% of children between 6 to 24 months are not fed to the recommended minimum meal frequency for age and breastfeeding status, which means however satisfied you are today with regards to feeding, there is a child that is less than 2 years old that will go to bed today not receiving the minimum. Not receiving the minimum. That's a child less than 2 years will go to bed hungry in this country. And what about diversity? Diversity is required for the child to get all that we talked about, the macro, micro, fiber, nutrients that are essential for growth and development. 65% do not meet the minimum dietary diversity. For some of you who run poultry here, your chicks are feeding better than 65% of Nigerians, because those your chicks, they meet all the diet. You want them to be optimal weight at a particular time. That is how bad it is. Only 17% of Nigerian children aged less than 2 years receive the minimum acceptable diet, and less than 50% are fed on iron-containing food. I mean, these are all grim statistics. Okay, so this is the trend, just to buttress the fact that to your left in Nigeria, nothing has changed about stunting. It's still there. There's been a slight reduction in underweight and a much more significant reduction in wasting. We see a similar trend in Ghana as well. Okay, so while we talk about nutrition, we are talking about children that are ordinarily, in homes where everything is all right. We also are not unmindful of the fact that we have children with special health care needs. Those are children that we in pediatric neurology we see, children with cerebral palsy, neurobehavioral disorders, children with autism. Our colleagues in China adolescent psychiatry, they also see children with psychiatric disorders. These are children, their population, particularly children with special health care needs, their population is increasing because we are surviving them now. Those days when you had a 5 months or 6 months old preterm, the possibility of surviving it was very remote. But now they survive, but they also have issues. Some will end up with neurodevelopmental sequelae. And if children without such are having those grim statistics, you can imagine what these ones will have. In a study we conducted in Zaria in 2013, we found that 55% and 13% respectively of children with cerebral palsy had undernutrition and stunting. That was similar to what was found out in Enugu by Okeke and Ojinaka. They saw 35% for undernutrition and 9.2% for stunting. Then we have children in emergency situations. There are IDP camps in Makurdi. When I got to Makurdi, and even right now, the cases of severe acute malnutrition, just reminded me of my medical school days. in Benin, in UBTH. You won't believe it. Nigerian children. We didn't want to show, or I didn't want to show photographs here. There are those that will really bring tears to your face. This group of children, or this particular children, we also need to consider nutrition in them. We have several families that have been displaced because of insurgencies. We are in the rainy season now. A lot of families will be displaced because of flooding, natural disasters. We need to also consider them, look at them, and incorporate them into our nutritional surveillance and nutritional interventional plans. So what are the dangers? So malnutrition, we talked about early physical growth failure, delayed cognitive development, diminished immunity, increased mobility and mortality. And undernutrition has been strongly associated with shorter adult height. That does not mean that those who are not tall here had malnutrition. We also know that, okay. Less schooling, reduced economic productivity, and offspring with lower birth weights. And this is particular in the women, where you now start having intergenerational malnutrition in the children. So the child grows up, is malnourished, it's a girl, it's not grown properly, pelvis is small, low birth weight baby, and the vicious cycle continues. All right, so a lower birth weight is also associated with, again, the consequence of undernutrition. It's associated with systolic hypertension, obesity, amongst others. Okay, this slide is also just talking more about the consequences of malnutrition. Now, this slide shows several studies that have been done relating nutrition to intelligence. And the summary of all of them is that if a child is malnourished, if a child is undernourished, if a child has severe acute malnutrition, particularly in the first 2 years of life, that child will definitely have some degree of cognitive impairment or some impairment with regards to intellectual functioning. So it's a wake-up call for each and every one of us. Because when the brain does not function optimally, we ultimately, each and every one of us here, suffer the consequences. All right, so what do we need to do? We need to assess nutrition. ABCD, anthropometry, occipitofrontal circumference, height, weight, mid-upper arm circumference. Biochemical methods, looking at serum albumin and other serum proteins that are indicators of nutrition or good nutrition. You need to conduct a clinical assessment. And the clinical assessment, we must also not forget psychological tests. And of course, there's a need to conduct a dietary assessment. So we've talked about the importance of growth monitoring, which is what you do with anthropometry. Now, a one-stop assessment of growth, taking height, weight, is not growth monitoring. So we will encourage, all stakeholders and all practitioners of child health or related practitioners of child health that it's important that if you ever find yourself needing to take weight, you must make sure it's a continuous process and not just a one-off thing. You might just be the one that will be saving that child, this country, the stress and the burden of the consequences of undernutrition. Okay, this is a growth chart. The growth chart are the charts that we use in plotting the growth curves of the children. Now, of course, as we'll find with one or two speakers later, there are even challenges associated with these charts. Sometimes the charts are not even available. The curves are charted in a hurry, not charted correctly, and so on and so forth. It's important, it's very important that we ensure that these assessment tools are available, in our institutions of practice. Okay, so these cutoff values are for public health significance. So if you have in a population stunting less than 2.5%, you should do some work, but you can go to sleep because it will be described as very low. Now, in Nigeria, it is 37%. 30%. So it is above 30% here, which means it is very high. That's to tell you how significant or how disturbing the issue of stunting is in Nigeria. All right, so how do we now address undernutrition or issues associated with malnutrition? So one way we can do that is to identify determinants of undernutrition, as captured in the conceptual framework described by UNICEF, and to set up strategies for addressing them. We can also pursue nutrition-specific interventions. These interventions address immediate determinants of fetal and child nutrition and development. They include exclusive breastfeeding, vitamin A and zinc supplementation, dietary diversity promotion, food fortification. We can also implement nutrition-sensitive interventions. They influence the underlying determinants of nutrition, making sure that we have, portable water. We make sure that we practice, good sanitation and environmental hygiene, and the rights of the child to existence, to good living, to education, to food, they are protected. Schooling and school health, I will talk about that briefly. Ensuring that we monitor, early child development, that each time a child is born, assessment of development should commence almost immediately. That child should be seen all through the period of childhood, looking out for deviations from normal. And of course, maternal, physical, and mental health is important. It's important. The emphasis is on maternal health. The reason is that with the life of a child, the woman needs to take care of herself and the child that she's carrying. So it's important. Their mental health as well. All right, so this is the conceptual framework of determinants of undernutrition as identified by UNICEF. So our goal should be, if we're looking at this conceptual framework, our goal should be looking at basic causes of undernutrition, underlying causes, immediate causes, and developing strategies for overcoming them. One very important nutritional intervention is the promotion of exclusive breastfeeding. So we should encourage and enlighten mothers and the general populace on the benefits of breast milk and breastfeeding. So fathers should be encouraged to support mothers as they breastfeed. Employers of labor should be encouraged to allow mothers, breastfeed even while they are at work. Provide places where children can be comfortably breastfed. We can also do that by celebrating World Breastfeeding Week. We join the whole world in celebrating the World Breastfeeding Week. By the way, the first week in August of every year is the World Breastfeeding Week, and we are going to be celebrating one very soon. That is the theme for this year's celebration. Step up for breastfeeding, educate, and support. And we are advised, and each and every one of you is advised to inform, anchor, engage, and galvanize activities, towards ensuring breastfeeding and the use of breast milk. We must also ensure or promote the intake of minimum daily requirements of nutrients. We all know that apart from the fact that some of our menus are not adequate, they are also heavily processed and lack minimum daily requirements of nutrients in them. And of course, we should treat nutritional disorders whenever we find them. Now, the nutritional intervention, the 100-day nutrition program is one that Professor Edwin talked about, and the program is about promoting, optimal growth and development from conception to in the first 2 years of life. Basically, it involves educating families and providing support to the mothers for exclusive breastfeeding, scaling up infant and young child feeding programs, raising awareness on the importance of growth monitoring, expanding immunization coverage and uptake. It's also about training communities on the importance of hand washing with soap to prevent illnesses. Like we know, or like we've said, infections, can put a drag on gains made with nutrition. Ensuring that eligible households receive their child support grants and have sufficient money to buy food. This is the election period, I think we should make sure that all those seeking our votes, you have these in their what? In their manifesto. I'm not hearing amen. Then the novel use of mobile health technology to deliver direct communications to parents and caregivers. It would be nice to see our young undergraduates or our young students coming up with not TikTok and dancing on social media from morning till night, doing booga and all of that, but using this technology in solving problems. Because we are talking about the future, their future. And I'm talking about the young ones because they are the ones that are technologically savvy. So growth monitoring, okay, so we talked about the importance or the relevance of growth monitoring in nutritional interventions. If you don't monitor growth, you will not detect deviations from normal. If you do not monitor growth, you will not understand or appreciate the impact of whatever interventions you've instituted. You know, if you do not study growth, you will not know what the trend or the format is in the community where you operate. So it's important that we look at growth monitoring. And for those who are administrators or heads of units or heads of departments, please make sure that you have adequate facilities for growth monitoring, from the very basic tape rules to your weighing scales. Very, very important. And the issue of manpower is another issue entirely. I think that will be taken up by some other speakers. So growth monitoring should be done routinely at health facilities, in school settings, and in all settings where children are catered for. Now, this just talks about frequency and timing of measurements. Now, the school health program, we've talked about, Professor Edwin just mentioned, or I think it's one of the earlier speakers that said something about the school health program. You know, promoting nutrition in schools, you know, will help us address quite a number of issues associated with undernutrition. As we all know, the school health program has its objectives looking at understanding, promoting, maintaining the health of the school population. And in doing this, we are able to provide school health services. So in schools, you're able to detect deviations, again, abnormalities associated with undernutrition. There's also the helpful instruction where children are taught about nutrition. So they grow into adolescents, and they grow into young adults, and they go into adults understanding the importance and relevance of nutrition and the implications of undernutrition. And then we are looking at the teachers or those who are also providing information of this on nutrition as also equipping themselves for their communities. These schools exist in communities, and when such information is shared, this entire school community benefits. So we can use the school health program to strengthen our nutritional intervention. So we can revamp it, we engage stakeholders in the provision of services. I know the Pediatric Association of Nigeria is looking at a school health program and how that program can be used in improving the lot of the Nigerian child. And we need to audit nutrition in schools and promote and increase school enrollment. When we are talking about nutrition in schools, it brings us to other issues associated with schools. And one of such is ensuring that we reduce the number of out-of-school children, in the schools. So, as I round up, our nutritional interventions, should look at developing the capacity of caregivers, to be nutritionally healthy themselves and then provide adequate nutrition to their wards. Such interventions should be able to bridge gaps in food security, should be able to provide routine nutritional services in healthcare and educational settings, as well as conduct periodic nutritional surveillance at all levels of governance and among children in especially difficult circumstances or emergency situations. There should be advocacy on the rights of the child to regular adequate nutrition and community enlightenment on nutrition. So I hope at the end of this, we will be able to take home why growth and development is very important. And that, in other words, that it is very important in the early childhood years, that nutrition plays a key role in ensuring optimal growth and development, as well as the fact that undernutrition or malnutrition can lead to suboptimal growth that causes stunting, wasting, or underweight. That undernutrition is associated with grim consequences and a future that is unsecured. Thank you very much for listening. Those are my references.